Professor Sachs, I'm sure you've picked up two kinds of opinion while you're here in India. There is one school of thought that echoes what you're saying, and another that agrees with what you've said, but believes that the stakes are very high for India, both in terms of the impact of the tariffs. There is now a 500% tariff threat looming large if that legislation goes through, and also security challenges because of our neighborhood, because of the turbulence in Asia. We have Pakistan and Bangladesh, where there are problems from a security perspective. And you have, of course, China, which remains a very complex relationship for Delhi. My question to you is, to those who say to you, and I'm sure you've had those voices, Trump is nuts, but we've just got to tolerate 2 more years of this. And so we shouldn't be drawn into a sort of gear shift with Washington. What would you say?
First, in terms of the instability of the neighborhood, the United States has caused a lot of it. This is part of the problem. You look at Pakistan. The U.S. has inflamed the situation with Pakistan, not China, but the United States. The U.S. acted to bring down Imran Khan. It decided one day, because Imran Khan said things that were too nice about Russia and China, this man has to go. They went back to the Pakistani military and to the politicians beholden to it. And within a month, he was voted out of office and then put in jail, actually, on extraordinarily trumped up charges. Then you look at Bangladesh and its color revolution. There's a lot of meddling going on. So the idea that the United States is the safety zone in this context, I think, probably puts things upside down. We don't know all the story. That's how covert operations by the United States work. But there are a lot of telltale signs of a lot of unpleasantness. The fact that the Pakistani military is dining in Washington is another sign that India has to think very carefully, not thinking that it's going to run into America's embrace as the source of safety. My view is that the BRICS are key. Uh, India-China bilateral relations, that's a long, complicated, and sometimes very painful story. I believe that that story should be resolved. But I think the best way for India to resolve it is in the context of the BRICS. The BRICS are the major countries of the world, period, but they're also the major countries of the world outside of the U.S. alliance. And if they stand together for the principles of the UN Charter, international law, staying in treaties, being responsible, that is extraordinarily powerful. It's safety for India. It's a natural kind of leadership for India. It is a way to security for India. And that is how I would basically recommend things. I do believe, I have to say, that India and China can and should resolve the bilateral issues. I believe that the common aims of India and China to have a peaceful, multipolar world in which those countries, your country and China, are not bullied or attempted to be bullied by the United States is a strong common interest. Now that the United States is ripping up the UN Charter, there's an even stronger common interest that the other 192 member states of the UN say, no, you can't rip up the UN Charter. This is what's keeping us safe. This is what is allowing us to address global issues. I say to my friends in China all the time, champion India's membership in the UN Security Council as the sixth permanent member. We need India, which is a great power, which is the world's most populous country, which is the world's fastest growing major economy. We need India as a permanent member of the Security Council. I want China to make that gesture because I want to resolve the bilateral challenges also so that we really move to a multipolar world. And the U.S. finally gets the message. You're 4% of the world population. You can thrive, you can use your successes, but you're 4% of the world population, and you can't dictate to the rest of the 96%.
I'll get to India and China and the BRICS in just a moment, but you mentioned the role of the United States in ousting leaders, bringing down governments through covert and sometimes even overt operations. Venezuela, for example, is overt, not covert. Um, you mentioned Pakistan and Bangladesh in that context, but you have actually documented how this has long been the policy of the United States of America. Perhaps with Trump, the difference is that he's literally rubbing the world's nose in the mud while he's doing it. Talk a little bit about the US regime change and what's changed under Trump.
First, the United States learned what it knows from the British. So we have to understand that. The British Empire was an empire of regime change. It would move borders, it would cheat, it would lie about borders, it would divide and conquer. It ruled the world in this way, including the Indian subcontinent, for about 150 years. And the United States learned from Britain. By the way, the British, or I get messages from Britain saying, please don't say British, it's the English. So I just want to put that footnote that I don't want to blame the Welsh and the Scots the same way necessarily. But take 1953. This was a kind of handoff from the British Empire to the American Empire in Iran in 1953 when MI6 and the CIA overthrew Mossadegh, the Democratic Prime Minister of Iran, because Mossadegh dared to say that the oil in Iran was actually Iranian, not British or American. So this is not a figure of speech or a cartoon. It's an actual playbook of how empire works in the last 2 centuries, I'd say the Anglo-American empire. The CIA was founded in 1947, and essentially from that date, the CIA has been the covert arm of overthrowing other governments. There are many playbooks for this, or there's a playbook with many different options. It can be direct coups, it can be kidnapping a president like the United States did last week. That is not unique. Manuel Noriega of Panama was kidnapped the same way. The president of Haiti in 2004 was taken to an unmarked CIA plane and flown to the Central African Republic from his residence one morning in a Haiti coup. It can be assassinations like Diem of Vietnam in 1963, or Patrice Lumumba in the beginning of Congo's independence. There are many assassinations. It can be color revolutions, meaning that the U.S. uses its now social media or mass media or so-called NGO presence, which it funds very amply through the National Endowment for Democracy, to get people out on the streets. When the government cracks down, then it intervenes one way or another with economic sanctions or with the CIA operations, or the unrest topples the government internally. I think what's happening in Iran right now is this kind of operation. Iranians are out on the streets because their economy is in a tailspin. But if you look at what Trump is doing, what's called maximal pressure, since he came into office, he's trying to bring the Iranian government down, including, of course, bombing it and giving a green light to Israel to use whatever means Israel wants to use to bring the Iranian government down. And a former CIA director, Mike Pompeo, on his New Year's posting, social media posting, said something to the effect that I welcome all those Mossad agents out on the streets of Tehran right now, stoking unrest. This is outrageous. This is how it's done. This is what happened in Ukraine in the end of 2013 and early 2014. The U.S. turned on its machine to bring out mass protests. I know some of how that was directly funded because people bragged to me about the U.S. funding of the protests in the Maidan. And then we know from intercepted messages of U.S. officials in early January 2014, they were already plotting who would lead the next government. So we can't take events at face value in a world of uh, this kind of U.S. covert action. We have to understand these events for what they are. The U.S. has military bases and CIA stations in about 80 countries in the world. It's estimated to be 750 to 800 overseas military bases. It's unique in world history, that kind of reach. The only one that came close to it was the British Empire, but the U.S. has far exceeded the British Empire in this regard. And that gives the U.S. a hand in the internal politics of many, many countries. Not India. India's way out of the reach of the United States, not China. But the United States tried it in Russia, and President Putin put it down. And frankly, I would advise governments anywhere in the world, don't let the National Endowment for Democracy in. That is a steering wheel for the United States. That is the way that the United States insinuates itself into your local politics. It's the opposite of sovereignty. It's the opposite of democracy. It is a kind of Orwellian name for an institution whose purpose is U.S. foreign policy, not the democracy of the country in question.